Hey everyone, welcome back to the Crocheted Caution Tape. I'm Erica. I will be the host and telling you all the story today of the Hinterkaifeck murders. This story kind of borderlines like true crime and mystery because these were never solved. I do need to give a warning that there are some disturbing aspects of this. There are some details that are a bit gruesome, so keep that in mind as you are viewing. So today's story takes place in Hinterkaifeck, Germany in 1922. Yeah, we're going way back for this one. So Hinterkaifeck is like 40 miles away from Munich in Germany. These murders are unsolved. It takes place on the Hinterkaifeck homestead belonging to the Grubers. Now let's introduce the Grubers. You have Andreas Gruber, who is the father. He's 63 years old, not a very well liked guy. He's got a bad reputation going around town, and he's very abrasive. Like, he's just not a pleasant fellow to be around. And then we got Cecilia, or Cecilia is how it's spelled, but couldn't find for sure pronunciation of her name, but I think it's Cecilia, as she is 72. Then also living at the homestead is their daughter Victoria, who's 35. Victoria was a widow. Her husband, Carl Gabriel, sorry, you all may see some puppy heads pop up. Sorry. So her husband, Carl Gabriel, had been killed in December of 1914 during World War I from a shell attack. Also living here were Victoria's children. We got the young Cecilia, who is 7, and young Joseph, who is 2. Now, the father of Joseph there's a debate. There's like several possibilities. Andreas is one. Yes, his grandfather is definitely one of the contenders for being Joseph's father. We know it's not Carl Gabriel because this is in 1922, Joseph's 2, so he was born in 1920, 6 years after Carl Gabriel had been killed in war. But Andreas has been suspected of an incestuous relationship with Victoria. Even went to court about it. Judges found both Andreas and Victoria guilty. What? Victoria? She was being abused. Anyway. So we'll touch more on that. But the second contender for little Joseph's father is Lorenz Schlittenbauer. He's the town's guide, and he had He had a relationship with Victoria. She had tried to, she had formed this relationship with him while he was still married, but he didn't act on these until after his first wife had passed. They also had a maid, the Grubers. The Grubers had a maid living with them at the time, and her name was Maria Baumgartner, and she was 44. So let's get back to Andreas and Victoria. We don't really know how, I mean, you can't imagine it being consensual. But they were accused of an incestuous relationship, and rightfully so. Incest was illegal, and they were suspected. The police had been tipped off, so they went to court. The court found them both guilty again. Okay. Andreas spent a year in jail, and Victoria spent a month. How they were both convicted, I don't know. It should have been Andreas, and it should have been longer than a year. He was abusing his daughter from the age of 16. Well, due to these rumors going around town, and with Andreas' abrasive personality, the family was pretty much reclusive. They did go out on Sundays to church because they were a very religious family. Okay. And little Cecilia had school. She was 7. She had to go to school. So, the town only saw Victoria and Cecilia on a regular basis due to Victoria walking Cecilia to and from school. So when the family isn't seen for a few days, nobody really thinks too much of it because they're a reclusive family. They don't leave their home that much. So now we're going to go to September of 1921, when the previous maid of the family she left. She left them. She suspected the house of being haunted and didn't feel comfortable in there. And she just suddenly quit. She claimed that the house was haunted, and she could not live there without being in constant fear. She heard random footsteps in the attic and strange sounds coming from the empty attic in the middle of the night. Doors would open and close all on their own every night at midnight. It's creepy. At first, let's see, Andreas dismissed this. He's like, poo-poo on the house being haunted. Poo-poo. No, it's not. Until a few months later, whenever Andreas also experienced the hearing of sounds coming from the empty attic and doors opening and closing on their own. But Andreas was a very private man. He decided to investigate the mysterious happenings on his own. He did tell a few neighbors about it, and they offered his help. And when he found nothing that could be causing this, he was offered help. He was offered, well, let's all go look and see what more people, more eyes. We could all find this. Andreas had won none of that. He's like, nope, I don't want any help. My home, my deal. No help. And one of his neighbors even offered to lend Andreas a gun to protect his family since they couldn't figure out what was going on. So, never found out what was wrong with it. Could never find the cause of the noises and the footsteps. So, previous maid quit. Now we're gonna go to the end of March of 1922. This is when things get more interesting, more creepy. So in March of 1992, they had a snowstorm. It's the middle of the winter in Germany and Bavaria, and there was a lot of snow. Snow covered the ground. So the Hinterkaifeck farm had a nice layer of snow surrounding the property and on the property. Now this farm, the property went to a wooded line. There were woods behind it, separating from other neighbors. So, Andreas, he was out and about along the farm tending to the animals when he found two sets of footprints. Well, some sources say two, some sources say one. He found a set of footprints coming from the wooded area, coming out of the woods and going straight to the farm, straight to the barn of the farm. So yeah, okay, wouldn't think anything of that, except there were no footsteps leaving. There were only footsteps coming to the farm. Went to the machine room. That lock had broken a few weeks prior, and Andreas just never seemed to have a reason to quickly replace that lock. So seeing the footprints, Andreas investigated the barn to see if he could find who the footprints belonged to. He searched the farm, searched the property, the machine room, the barn. He couldn't find anybody. Yeah, couldn't find anybody. Well, a couple of days after this instance, he found a newspaper on the property. And no, big deal, a newspaper, except that this newspaper was one of the big newspapers of Munich, and you had to be subscribed to this newspaper or buy it in Munich in order to have a copy of it. Nobody in his family had subscribed nor picked up the newspaper, so random sets of footprints leading to his barn, not leading away, a Munich newspaper found. He still doesn't want any help. I know. Nope, I do not want help. I do not want help searching. I do not want a gun to help protect my family. Okay, cool. So, there was nobody there. Dun, dun, dun. Later on, neighbors would claim the Grubers mentioned that a set of their keys had also gone missing during this time. Set of keys that was hanging up with there, the keys just vanished. But again, he doesn't want help. I don't know. So we're going to go to Friday, March 31st. This was the day that Maria Baumgartner arrived at Hinterkaifeck. She arrived with her sister, who helped her get settled in, and she was there. She helped her get set in. It was Maria's first day, and after a couple of hours, Maria's sister left her. It is quite possible that Maria's sister was in fact the last person to see the Grubers alive outside of their murderers. April 1st was a Saturday. One of the neighbors, Michael Plockel, I am probably butchering these German names. I know German, but they're weird. I haven't seen spelling quite like this. So Michael Plockel saw some smoke coming from the Gruber's home. So, hey, there's somebody there. Nothing, like I said, town wouldn't think anything weird of not seeing them for a couple of days. So he also saw somebody with a lantern going between the house and the barn. It was too dark and too far away for him to tell exactly who it was. So assuming it was Andreas just going back and forth. And later on that day, Simon Riebelander, another neighbor, saw two strangers standing by the woods. When Simon went to go approach and see who the strangers were, what they wanted, as soon as he started to approach them, they turned and went the opposite direction. So Simon was like, okay, and he went on about his business. Monday, April 3rd. The postman noticed that the mail that he had brought on Saturday was still in the mailbox. He thought that this was odd. The Grubers checked their mail daily. So why was the mail he took on Saturday still in the mailbox? So he went to town and he was like, hey, this is a little weird. Don't y'all think? A little weird? Alright, but nothing happened. April 4th. Albert Hoffner stopped by the farm to repair a diesel engine in the machine room. He went to the house, he knocked, didn't get an answer. But he noticed that the machine room door was open. So he'd been here before, he knew what he was doing, he knew what he was there to fix, so he just went to work. He was in there for about 4 hours fixing this room. And at this time, during this whole time, he didn't see anybody. No signs of the family, no signs of anyone. He did notice that the cattle had been fed and the dog had been fed, but the dog he could hear the dog barking from the barn, inside the barn. But he just went back to work, fixing the engine, and after 4 hours, he was finished, and whenever he walked out of the machine room, he found the Gruber's dog chained outside of the barn in front of the house. He was in the barn, locked in the barn, and now he was outside of the house. But Albert didn't see anybody. He was like, okay, so he went to go knock on the door again. Still nothing. So he went on his way and went back to town. So, yeah. I don't know. Okay. Nope. So whenever Albert returned back to town, he ran into Lorenz Schlittenbauer. And he told Lorenz about what he had experienced. And he's like, that's weird. So Lorenz became worried, and because he had also not seen the family in quite a few days. So Lorenz gathered a couple of friends and they went to the farmstead. They got there at about 8:30 p.m. It's pretty dark. Middle of winter. 8:30, yeah, it's probably still a little dark. All of the doors to the house, they were locked. So they went to the barn. The barn door was open. Barn door wasn't open, but now it is open. And as they went into the barn, they found the horrible sight of the bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia. They were all stacked on top of each other with hay and pieces of door just laying on top of them trying to hide them. Now Lorenz moved all of the bodies around. He said he was trying to see if any of them were still alive. And I know this was in the 1920s, but they still knew not to touch evidence. They knew not to disturb a crime scene, but yeah, here he was, just... So as he was moving these bodies around, he noticed that Maria was not present, nor was little Joseph. So there was a hall that connected the house to the barn. So Lorenz was like, hey, you two stay here, I'm gonna run to the house. And he ran. Don't know if the murderer's still there, but hey, I'm gonna run into this house by myself. Let's go. So the first room that he came to, right outside of the kitchen, was Maria's room. And he did, in fact, find Maria in her bed. She had also been killed. Lorenz continued searching the house, looking for little Joseph. And he found him. Poor little Joseph was found in his crib, kind of half covered with one of Victoria's dresses. And they had killed young Joseph as well. So they had found all 6 bodies of the family that was living at the farm. Lorenz ran back through and told his friends that they needed to go contact the police. He was going to stay there. Still don't know where who the murderer was. Don't know where, if they're still there. I'm going to stay here. You all go fetch the police. Well, see, the nearest police station was in Munich, 45 miles away from Hinterkaifeck. So the police did not show up until about 5:30 the next morning. Now, Hinterkaifeck was a very small town. Word spread very quickly, especially when it comes to something like someone being murdered. So by the time the police came, like, everybody in town was at the farm. They were going around, they were like moving stuff around. Lorenz had already moved the bodies around. These people were just hanging out at the crime scene. Okay. Just hang out at the crime scene. They even cooked meals and ate while waiting on the police. You have 6 dead bodies that are just in the other room. Sure, let's cook and eat. I have no idea. I have no idea what was going through their head, but that just seems absolutely insane to me. God. So, the inspector from Munich, let's see, George Reingruber. He got to the crime scene to see that it was completely destroyed. The crime scene had been trampled on, like people were moving around evidence. Cooking and eating. They did feed the animals and milk the cows, but so Ryan Gruber called in the medical team to do an autopsy. They found that the family were all killed with a mattock. It's like a pickaxe that is typically used for digging and cutting. Looks a lot like a pickaxe. So, the whole family, they were struck in the head with the mattock, one by one. The murderers somehow got the family members to come out to the barn, one at a time. And that's how somehow got him out there, and as they entered the door, he was hiding, jumped out, and smashed him above the head. Most of the family died instantly from this blow to the head, except for little Cecilia. This little girl was tortured. Yes, she was hit upside the head. There was evidence that her and her mom had also been strangled. But this did not kill Cecilia. Somehow this little girl survived this. And she lay there for hours. Hours. Watching her family get killed, bleeding profusely from the head, being strangled, and she was alive. So there was evidence that showed that this poor little girl had pulled at her hair out of shock of what she had seen and the shock her body was in from the trauma that when she was found, she had bits of her hair in her hand where she had literally sat there and pulled her hair up. How can somebody do this? I don't know, but she did not survive overall. She just survived for an extra couple of hours, and they weren't found for days afterwards. So, police thought that the strangulation of Victoria and Cecilia had happened before the blows, but they couldn't be for sure. All they knew for sure was they were dead. All 4 were hit. Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia. They were hit multiple times in the head with the mattock. Awful. Awful. Victoria was hit 9 times. So afterwards, the family was taken to Munich to do more investigating of the bodies to see if they could find any more evidence. They couldn't find anything else. So they sent the bodies back to Hinterkaifeck for the bodies to be buried. Except for one little detail. They removed their heads. Yep, all 6 of the victims had their heads removed so that they could continue their search for evidence. So yes, that does mean that all 6 were buried without their heads intact. Without their heads even in... No, nothing, gone. Eventually their heads were moved to Nuremberg. But during World War II, and when Nuremberg got destroyed, as did their heads. So the police had noticed that after the murders, the killer or killers had in fact stayed in the home for days after the murder. They could have been there whenever the bodies were found and just came out with all the townsfolk and just slipped away. They fed the dog, they fed the cattle, they milked the cow, and they cooked food with dead bodies in the next room. I don't understand. Now, while I did say that these murders have never been solved, they haven't. It's been over 100 years, and there's never been enough evidence to convict somebody. There were several, hundreds maybe, of suspects. Don't have time to go through all of those. We're going to go through a few, though. Start with the Thaler brothers. The year before the murders, Joseph was the older brother. They were known as thieves around the town. And they were seen at Hinterkaifeck farmstead the year before. The former maid had told them, he was trying to get her to tell them where the family slept. I don't know why. She refused. But afterwards, she did see them standing out by the barn, looking up towards the home's roof. Suspicious. Then 2 years before, the former maid, had also said that she found the brothers hiding in the barn. Okay. Andreas did force them out by shooting towards them with a rifle. Even with that very, very sketchy past, the police ruled them out. They were thieves. And the police found cash and jewels and all of their valuables laid about the house. So if it were them, they would have taken that. The next suspects are Adolf and Anton Gump. Adolf was rumored to have been involved with Victoria. There's not enough evidence, though, to place him at the scene. Yeah, very sketchy. But prior to the Gruber murders, Adolf had been suspected, along with 3 others, of killing 9 peasants in 1921. Adolf could not be found for questioning. However, 30 years later, in 1951, their sister, Crescencia Meyer, made a deathbed confession. She said, hey, Adolf and Anton, they killed that Gruber family. There was no proof. There was no evidence of it. But she did make this deathbed confession, and the police looked into it, because even in 1951, they still hadn't solved the murder. Adolf had died in 1944, though, in World War II. So they did arrest Anton, and they questioned him profusely. But again, no evidence. There was no evidence to link them to the family, to the farm, nothing outside of their sister's deathbed confession. Although, why would a sister do that? Who knows? So all of the charges against Anton were dropped in 1954. And Anton, he did serve some time in prison while they were questioning him, but it was just a few days. The next suspect is, to me, the most far-fetched one, but hey, it was a credible, they took it very seriously. The next suspect was Carl Gabriel. Yes, Carl Gabriel. Victoria Gabriel's dead husband, who had been killed in World War I. His body was never found. There were tons. It was a lot of bodies during the war were not found. But they were like, hey, his body wasn't found. Maybe he went off to Russia. Him and Victoria did not have the best of marriages. It was pretty much an arranged marriage that Carl's mom and dad were like, yeah, hey, we could get, if you marry Victoria, we could get Hinterkaifeck farm somewhere down the line. So, he did leave Victoria prior to joining the army, and his parents had talked him out back, convinced him into coming back to Hinterkaifeck. But that didn't last long. He knew that there was something going on between Andreas and Victoria, and he was like, I don't want anything to do with this. So, since he couldn't leave the marriage, he signed up for the army and was soon involved in World War I. So the theories that some of the townsfolk have are that he never died. He went off to Russia. And when he returned home and found little Joseph, he knew that Joseph couldn't be his. He'd been away for 8 years. Couldn't have been. So he got angry. Some say that Victoria may have seen him the night before, and she ran off into the woods and didn't return until neighbors found her in the woods. But this is Percy. So he didn't die in World War I. He moved to Russia, and he returned and got angry because Victoria had a kid, and he knew it wasn't his. Took his anger out on the family. The townspeople saw Carl during and after the murders. They saw somebody in uniform. Police did look into it, but they quickly ruled this out because they found some of the soldiers that Carl was stationed with, and they confirmed that they did indeed see Carl Gabriel's lifeless body after a shell attack in December of 1914. That guy did it? No. Our final suspect that we're going to discuss is good old Lorenz Schlittenbauer. He's the one who found the bodies. He moved the bodies even though he knew he shouldn't be messing with a crime scene. Even the guys that he took with him, they thought that he did it because he didn't seem disgusted when he found the bodies. He was just moving them. Now Lorenz says that, oh, I was trying to find Joseph. Joseph is my son. But in previous situations, Lorenz had denied Joseph being his, no matter how much Victoria had claimed it. Victoria was like trying to get alimony and child support from Lorenz to help support and take care of Joseph, and Lorenz was like, no, not my kid. But then him disturbing all the bodies he was looking for, he was like honed in on trying to find his son. Okay. So like I said before, 1920s, they still knew not to mess with a crime scene. But yet people were still cooking meals and having meals with dead bodies in the next room. That's okay. Alright. So yeah, his reactions were not normal. He was very calm. He's not disgusted at these bodies that were very much bloodied, and little Cecilia, and he was reported to having keys to the farm. Missing keys that they couldn't find previously? Maybe. Now Victoria did, she did like Lorenz, and she wanted to marry him. And, you know, after Lorenz's first wife had died, you know, he did ask her, like, he wanted to, but he wanted to go to their parents first. And of course Andreas wanted nothing to do with this. He was like, no, you cannot take Victoria away from me, because he knew that if Lorenz and Victoria got married, Victoria would leave. Can't blame her. I would have gone out of there too. Find any way to get out of there from his abuse. But so Lorenz was not able to marry Victoria because Andreas threatened him. He was like, no. So then Lorenz was like, maybe he's not my kid. But then Victoria cried and cried. Lorenz even like filed a complaint, filed a complaint with the police about Victoria and Andreas' continued relationship. That was very inappropriate. Now Victoria, she's like, I don't want this, I don't, and she cried, and he eventually did withdraw his complaints to the police. But she did win with, Lorenz was supposed to start paying child support for young Joseph. So he tried to deny that Joseph was his, but everything was saying that he was. He had a relationship with Victoria, and he says that he was pushing the bodies around to find his son, to find Joseph. And, you know, police did point out that Lorenz had, in the past, just been like, no, that's not my kid. Not my kid. But now he's got to find his kid. Lorenz said that he only denied Joseph being his whenever he found out that Andreas and Victoria were still having their relationship. So, their theory with Lorenz was Victoria was successful in court. He was to be paying her alimony or child support. I've seen both. I would think it would be more child support than alimony because they were never actually married. And, you know, Lorenz did not want this. He did not want to pay money to this family. So, in order to get out of paying them, he murdered them. There were instances in the days leading up to the murders where some townsfolk, they heard Victoria and Lorenz arguing over the child support payments and arguing over the paternity of little Joseph. So Lorenz came out and was like, yeah, Yosef's my kid. Everything was very circumstantial. Very no solid evidence to show. Of course there's not, because the townsfolk destroyed all of the evidence. Lorenz destroyed the evidence by moving the bodies around. So there was no evidence for the police to be like, yes, this is the person. So 101 years later, there has never been a solid, this is who did it. There was no charges put against anybody that stuck because there was no evidence. So, what are your thoughts? Did Lorenz do it? Or did the Gump brothers do it? Or did Carl Gabriel come back from the dead and do it? Like I said, this had a little bit of everything in there. You got your true crime with the murders, you got your mystery because you got the hauntings, you got the never solved. But please, tell me who you think, who your strongest contender for the murders were. And if you have enjoyed this show, please hit subscribe and like and share with your friends if you have other friends that would be interested in learning more about random cases and random instances throughout history. Let your friends know. Have them subscribe. And if you want to know when my next stories come out, also hit that notification button. Okay? Thank you. As always, you have a great day. And I will be seeing you guys later. Bye-bye.